Okay, we are ready to begin. Take it away, Bobby.
I know Jean Moss for some years as president of the San Diego Jewish Genealogy Society, which meets at the JCC. She served for several years as the president, although I suppose she joined before we voted her into president. And so she's been there many more years than I might even remember. But for most of us, our genealogy starts from stories we heard from parents and grandparents, aunts, uncles, and maybe even cousins. But when you're an adoptee, that's not quite how your history evolves. Jean Moss was adopted at 4.5 months in Bronx, New York, and decided in 2009 that it would be a good idea to try and find more out about her birth family to obtain her medical history. Knowing that both families were Jewish, she joined the San Diego Jewish Genealogical Society to begin her search, and that's when I first met her. She is a member of multiple societies in San Diego, the Jewish Genealogical Society in New York, and she is presented at many national, regional, and local genealogical conferences. She's a pretty good speaker. She developed research skills from each society that helped her to eventually find her family. It is a much more elaborate process to do your genealogy as an orphan than or an adoptee than it is to do it because you knew your mother, father, grandparents, and relatives. Please join me in welcoming Jean Moss so we can hear from her how her story of genealogy evolved. Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby. I appreciate you inviting me so I can present to CBI and all their members. As Bobby said, I was adopted at a young age. These are my parents. They told me about my adoption when I was about 5 years old. I was in a loving family and I really had no desire about my birth family. At 5 years old, who really cared? This is my family tree as the adoptee. I'm Jean Gwen Selkowitz, my parents, Leslie and Anita, my grandparents, Isadora and Evelyn, Jacob and Dora, my great-grandparents. I decided at my mother's funeral that I really wanted to know about my birth family. I talked to a cousin who was an adoption lawyer, how to go about finding it. I didn't want him to do the work. I just wanted some guidance. And he said to me, it's a closed state. I can't help you at all. I was really disappointed with his answers, especially for the fact that he adopted his first child. So I thought he would be more understanding and compassionate, but obviously I was wrong. So I plugged along and did my own research. 3 of us became cousins after being adopted from the same agency. My mother's sister's daughter, my father's sister's daughter, and myself. I did ask one of my cousins if she knew how to go about finding my birth family. She told me we were adopted from the Louise agency, which is no longer in business, but that Spence Chapin agency are holding those records. She found her birth family. Her mother wanted nothing to do with her, but she is in contact with her half-brother. And that's probably one of the reasons I didn't want to open up a can of worms, figuring out if I'm given up for adoption, maybe there was a reason that I didn't want to know. Louise Wise Agency was founded in 1916 as the Free Synagogue Child Adoption Committee by philanthropist and adoptive advocate Louise Waterman Wise. It was an agency with Jewish communal origins, reached an agreement with Spence Chapin, a similar organization, to house and manage documents from some 80 years of services. It means that thousands of people whose lives were affected by adoptions will continue to have limited access to birth records and other material that might aid them with reunion efforts and health issues. The agencies are prohibited from providing identifying information about birth parents, but other facts, especially medical data, can be obtained. But let's face it, when you're adopted and given medical information, who knows what's happening in 20, 30, 40, 50 years later. So the medical data isn't as helpful as you would think. The basic information about the birth parents can be starting point for adoptees trying to carry out a search on their own. It's important that they know about their birth parents and have a sense of who they are. Those seeking to be reunited with children placed for adoption or with birth parents can enroll in 2 registries, one run by the state and one private. I did register with both, and I did never hear back from either of those agencies. Spence Chapin joined Louise Wise on East 94th Street before the latter moved to new quarters, which would provide free counseling and other services to former Louise Wise clients and adopted children. Both agencies date back to the early 20th century. Spence Chapin is the product of a merger of 2 agencies that began in the early 1900s with moving abandoned children from orphanages to foster care. The agency's original purpose was to find homes for Jewish orphans. Its mission changed over the years as it increased services to family counseling, foster care, residential services for teenage mothers and their babies. The agency shut down in 2004, citing substantial reductions in public funding and $1 million per year deficit. It was one of 5 agencies to close due to funding cuts and a reduced foster care caseload. This was Spence Chapin. I did speak to a counselor there, and she told me that I could go to the New York Public Library and cross-reference my birth certificate to find my birth name. I didn't realize that the original and the adopted certificate numbers are the same, and that's a picture of the New York Public Library. So I was in Brooklyn with some cousins, and I hopped on the Sheepshead Bay train. I went to the library, and it's in the Ida and Paul Milstein room. There are volumes for your birth records, and mine was luckily only 2 volumes for 1951. I found my name after 4 hours, luckily in volume 1. Hard decision, where do I start, the beginning or the end? So I only had a few hours because I had to meet my family back in New York for dinner. And luckily I found my name is Deborah Gavilo. So that was the starting point of what I'm going to be doing next and how to find the rest of the family. On February 26th, the counselor called me from Spence Chapin with my birth history. I did receive a copy of it March 5th. It only gave non-identifying information, which I knew that up front. Now that I've got all this information, what do I do with it and how do I begin my research? The paperwork was packed with detailed information about my birth family, as you will see in the next few slides. And some of it was rather shocking news. And here's the paperwork. So on July 12th, 1951, my birth mother contacted the agency. She was referred by her mother. Her mother said she was referred by a friend. But in actuality, my grandmother was the one at the residence and gave up a boy for adoption in 1939, which no one in the family knew about. Personally, that seems hard to believe, but I guess she hid it very well. My birth mother was born in 1931 in the northeastern region of the US. She was an attractive, young, Jewish petite woman, short and slight, dark eyes, dark complexion, curly hair, and a smoker. Warm, friendly, nicely dressed, good manners, organized with questions and information. My maternal grandfather was Filipino, which was part of my shocking news. And my mother did have some Asian features. She was described as a happy-go-lucky girl with many friends who never worried about things. She was in good health, had measles, chickenpox, and a tonsillectomy. Completed 6th term in high school, but left because she was tired of it. She had fair grades, except in bookkeeping, which she found most interesting and did very well. She did general office work. She was a stable work history and contributed all of her money to the family. She liked to travel and enjoyed sports. Both my mother and my grandmother were eager to find a place where my mother can live while pregnant. They wanted to keep it confidential. Obviously, back in 51, it wasn't something that people talk about. So it was a big secret. She had an 18-year-old sister at the time, a half brother who was 10 years old, and a half sister 14 months old. Her mother, my grandmother, remarried, and my mother had a good relationship with her stepfather. My mother did not know that her parents really were not married. Lots of secrets in this family. And the family always had financial problems. My birth father was born in 1925, Caucasian and Jewish. He was 5'4" tall, heavy build, brown blonde hair, and a fair complexion. He had not completed high school. He worked sporadically as a taxi and truck driver. No seriously illnesses, was nearsighted, and wore glasses. Well, I also wear glasses, hereditary. They knew each other for about 2 years. They planned to get married in July of 51. They had the rings, the license, and the required blood tests. They broke up 3 times shortly before the wedding. My father received notification of a required court appearance for driving violations and was in danger of losing his license. Well, without a driver's license, he could not work and wanted to delay the wedding. Both families did not like each other. So my grandmother thought he was lazy, a heavy drinker, and had a bad reputation in the neighborhood. My mother said he was always kind to her, considerate, and they enjoyed being together. She had dated many young men before him, but he was the only one that she was intimate with. My birth father's mother was a registered nurse and suggested adoption. She didn't even mention marriage, even though they were engaged. She said she knew a wealthy family eager to adopt a baby. My mother thought his mother was shrewd and wanted to get money for the baby. My mother became angry and wanted nothing to do with him and his family. And that was the final straw, and they broke up permanently. On August 2nd, 51, the application was approved for my mother to move to the maternity residence in Staten Island. She adjusted quickly, was liked by the staff and the other young women there. She met regularly with the social worker. My mother told the social worker she appeared calm but could not express how she felt. On November 4th, I was born in Staten Island at 7:58 p.m. After 17 hours and 58 minutes of labor, I weighed 5 pounds, 6 ounces. Tiny little girl. Things changed over the decades, though. The policy after the birth allowed the mother to care for the infant before being discharged. My mother thought this was too painful. She went to the nursery daily and cried each day there. On November 23rd, I was brought to the agency to be admitted to temporary care. My mother was very upset, but she knew it was the best thing to do. I was moved to a home of a Louise Wise boarding care family. I had severe diaper rash, took a bottle slowly, tired easily, and sometimes refused food. At the home, being the only infant, I received a great deal of warmth and nurturing and began to eat better, gain weight, was happier, and the diaper rash cleared up. All good things. My birth mother kept in contact with the social worker, always asking about me. She found a job quickly, giving all her earnings to her family. She was withdrawn socially for some time. She was worried how she would react to seeing my father in the neighborhood, but when it happened, she just walked past him without even looking at him and didn't even care. So she survived well. On March 24th, 52, she was pleased after signing the legal documents to put me up for adoption. She eventually resumed contact with her friends, started dating somebody that she knew in the neighborhood who was on leave from the military, and they married in the fall of 1952. On March 26th, I met my adoptive parents, not that I can remember any of this. They were very excited when they saw me. They were overjoyed seeing me in the bassinet. My adopted mother asked why the social worker did not tell them how beautiful I was, and my adopted father kissed my hands and feet, and I could picture him doing that. They held me and admired every feature, regretting they could not take me home that day. When they left, I was told they were both beaming. There I am, about 4.5 months old, and I became Jean Gwen Selkowitz. In April of '52, the social worker said I adjusted well to the new home and seemed very happy. My adoptive parents were devoted to me, and I had a special relationship with my father until he passed in 1970. I walked at just over a year. I had difficult time teething, and I was very connected to both my parents. My mother didn't keep any paperwork. She was not a pack rat. And when I was in New York in 2008, I spoke to a gal at the Bronx Surrogate Court, and she sent me my adoption certificate. So this is the only paperwork that I have regarding my adoption. This is my actual birth certificate. It's a short form. It does show that the adoption was legal as of June 2nd. And it shows that I was born in Richmond, which is the county for Staten Island. March 8th, 2009, as a member of San Diego Jewish Genealogical Society, I talked to a couple of members about my adoption. One of the gals loved to do research, and she found information on Narciso Gavilo, who may be my maternal grandfather, which the Filipino name, it made sense. He sailed from Marseille, France on December 20th, 1926 on the President Van Buren, and he arrived in Boston January 11th, 1927. All of these images that you'll see, I found on either Ancestry, MyHeritage, or Family Search, and there's lots of information out there. This is Narciso's death certificate. It shows he was born December 15, 1902 in the Philippines. He died April 19th, 1977, and lived in Miami. A lot of people from New York migrate down to Miami for the warm weather. So on May 21st, I was able to find contact information for Narciso's son. I talked to him. He said he met a boy that was his half brother, and this is probably the boy that Clara gave up for adoption. He said his father was only married to his mother, Carmen, but obviously he didn't know what happened in his previous life. And he didn't know anything about Clara or who she was. So now I'm not sure, were they married? Were they not? Who knows? But I kept searching. I was in New York again on June 11th, 2009. I went to the Patrog Medford Library. They had a huge genealogical section for a small library, and the librarian there was extremely helpful, and she helped me do some research. She said that they were going to New York to the Municipal Archives to do research, which they do every so often. And I was able to reserve a seat to go in with them, because at least they knew where they were going and I had no idea. So before I went to the Municipal Archives, I had to find out more details who my mother was. So this is the Family History Library in Plainview, New York. After going through the microfiche records, I found my mother's name as Geraldine Gavilo, and now I needed to find out her married name. So there I am on the 24th. We hopped on the train from Patchogue to New York City, and that's a picture of the Municipal Archives. I wasn't able to find a lot of information at the Municipal Archives, so I decided to walk down to the Marriage Bureau to purchase the license for my mother, Geraldine Gavilo, and it was for Mr. Penn, her married name. So now I had her married name and everything, and that worked out. Then when the clerk brought that up to me, she said, I have this other paperwork are you interested in it? And I said, yes. I didn't even ask what it was. It was another $5 investment, which was great. And it wound up being the affidavit for the license for my mother and my father, Seymour Zwerin. So now I know his name. Now I have to get more details. And this was the affidavit, and it had where they both lived, their names, their parents' names. So it was a good start with knowing more information. And then this is the affidavit for my mom and the gentleman that she did actually marry. So while I was there, I decided to go to the health department. I figured, let me see if I can get birth certificates. Well, they don't release birth certificates unless you have a death certificate. I just found my parents' names. I didn't know any of this stuff. So I tracked back to my friend's house in New York, and I emailed my friends in San Diego that night, and they did some research for me and found information on Ancestry.com. Both parents were listed in the Social Security Death Index, which obviously meant that they were gone. But at least I had details and who they were. They also found my mom's last resident was in Philly, and her obituary was on the Philly.com newspaper archives. Seymour died in Florida. So like I said, everybody migrated to Florida from New York. So this is my mom's obituary. It listed the name of her girls, her sister, her half brother, her grandchildren, her great grandchildren. It's a wealth of resources of information. So in having all this information, I thought, well, the girls may not know who I am, but my aunt should know because she was a few years older than my mom. So I decided that I looked in the white pages, I found a phone number for her, and she was in Philadelphia and I'm in New York. So it wasn't a big trip. And I contacted her eventually. This is the death index for my mom, also online. I did call Aunt Lenore on the 29th. I had called a few times and I only got voicemail, and I didn't want to leave a message saying, hi, I think I'm your relative. So I kept trying, and then I finally did reach her. I was hesitant, not knowing what kind of reaction I would get from the family, but to my surprise, she was very warm, welcoming. And one of the first things she had said was, we were always hoping that you would call us someday. And that just made me feel so good. She said immediately, here's your sister's phone numbers, call her right now. She gave me her work, cell, and house number. And yes, I hung up from that and I called my sister. I was going to Jersey to visit a cousin of mine on for 4th of July weekend that year. So we made arrangements to meet at the Cracker Barrel restaurant, which was in off of exit 5 on the Jersey Turnpike. And that was about halfway for all of us. There's the Cracker Barrel restaurant. We sat on those rocking chairs for hours talking, of course, after we ate. And I learned a lot about the family. They brought pictures and documents. And it was funny because when my cousin and I walked into the restaurant, I said to her, I have no idea who these people are. I never met them. So when we walked in and we looked around, I said, oh, there's 2 short people. They have to be them. And we were right. So there's a picture of my Aunt Lenore, myself, and my sister Sharon. So it was a great reunion, and we've gotten together many times, of course, when I go back east. So July 3rd, according to the family lore, per Aunt Lenore, she said that she thinks my grandfather's name is Cayetano Lysing, not Narciso Gavilo, even though his name is on my mom's marriage license. She said that Narciso married my grandmother, Clara, so he could stay in the US. Clara, her mother, my grandmother, may have had an affair with Cayetano Lysing, who was her best friend's husband. More shocking news. So my mother told the family about me when Sharon was about 7 years old. They said every year on my birthday, my mother would make it a special day to remember me. And that seems so very touching. Cayetano Lysing sailed from Manila in the Philippines on the Empress of Asia. He arrived in Vancouver, British Columbia on August 4th, 1928. He was born in the Philippines in 1905 and also lived in Florida, and more documents. Pictures of my mom as a younger girl. As she got older, I could see more of the Asian features in her. Family photos and more family photos. And my mom, when she was a lot older and definitely looked more Asian at that time. The picture of her in the pink I have on my desk at work, and people come up to me and, I tell them that it's my birth mother and my adopted parents, and they say, you look just like your mother. And I keep looking at that and I just don't see it. Also another picture of Mom and Sharon. This is my Uncle Howard, his wife, Aunt Phyllis, their son, Michael, and my sister, Sharon. I have a lot of documents from, I found the Weissman family in 1920, so it confirms all their names, and I know who's my actual birth family. The 1930 census, and my father, the muster rolls when he was in the Navy. This was his death file. I found this mortgage paperwork also online, and I was kind of surprised to see it. It's for a property he owned in Florida, and there was a gal's name on there. I tried to reach out to her, but no luck in trying to locate her. This was his death index from his Social Security index. And then I did acquire his death certificate. He died in Broward County on June 4th in 1986 at 60 of lung cancer. And he was born August 12, 1925 in New York. On October 25th, with the help of my friends, we found Zwerin's living in Pompano Beach, and I knew that's where Seymour lived. I called 5 of them, all disconnected numbers. One was a business. I didn't want to leave a message there. I kept playing phone tag all week with him. I did finally get a call back from him, and it wasn't even the right Zwerin family. I didn't think Zwerin was a common name, but obviously it is. So back in New York in December, I went to the New Montefiore Cemetery because that information was on my dad's death certificate. And the funny thing about it is he's buried in the cemetery next door to my adopted parents. When I went into the office, they did give me the name of the contact person for the family plot. And that was how I could get more details about who the family was. So I went to the family plot at the cemetery, and there were in the Zwerin Markowitz family plot. And this is a headstone of my dad. And now I knew all the correct family members for this Zwerin family. And then I was able to go online. David Zwerin is my great-grandfather. 1930 census. This was when his wife came over with their kids. And this is another close-up of it. So they had 3 young children, and she came from Austria. December 23rd, I tried looking for phone numbers to Mr. Zwerin because I found out that he was living in Brooklyn, could not find any information. I wrote a letter. I did get a call back from his wife a few days later. She said she didn't know anything about me, but she spoke to Seymour's sister and confirmed that she remembered that there was a baby. I did receive a call from my aunt, Seymour's sister, kept trying to make arrangements to meet the Zwerins since they lived in Brooklyn and I was there visiting family. Just didn't work out. So on the 26th, I drove to Sharon's home in Jersey. I met her significant other. I met some of her children and their families. I learned a lot of information about her and my mother. And Sharon and her significant other said that I reminded them of my mother, and I had a lot of gestures like our mother, which, I never met the woman, and it's just so weird that I reminded them of her. This is Sharon and her 4 boys. Rather old picture. I can't get anything more recent. The 2 in the front are twins. Another picture from 1947 that Aunt Lynn had, and it's Aunt Lynn, Seymour, Jerry, and then 2 of their friends taken at Coney Island. Also on December 26th, Aunt Lynn said that her father was not the same father as my mother's father. Her mother would never tell her who her father's real name was. And even on her deathbed, she could not find out who he is. This was the paperwork on the naturalization for Narciso Gavilo. And this is more information for the index records. This is Cayetano Lysing on the 1930 census. Also the index card for Cayetano. And this was his petition for naturalization, and it lists his wife and their children, their address. So all these paperwork has lots of information that you could use in your research, and it was extremely helpful for me. This was his death index card. In August 2011, I was in New York again. I was unable to meet the Zwerin family in Brooklyn. As I said, always an excuse, but I kept trying. So that year, I was supposed to meet Sharon and Aunt Lynn in Atlantic City. And there was this thing called a hurricane that year, so we got delayed a little bit. But on September 1st, we did get to Bally's Hotel in Atlantic City. Sharon loves to gamble, so she got us a room and meals comped for the 3 days. And this was a picture of the window, from our window, and it was just beautiful down there. I got a lot of the medical history about my mom and other family members. I enjoyed visiting with them and learning about my mother's family. We ate enough in 3 days for a week, but we did a lot of walking on the boardwalk and gambling, and I did walk away. I broke even. Sharon, not so lucky. March 11th, 2012, I spoke to my Aunt Seymour's sister. I called her for holidays and Mother's Day, but this time she didn't seem very friendly towards me at all. I was only able to confirm information and names if I had them. She wasn't willing to give me any details. She said Seymour died of cancer, which I already knew, but she said he had no other health problems. She did say that he had a son, Bobby, that died in 1971 at 2 years old, and that why didn't I call my brother? And I told her I didn't even know I had a brother. She said after Seymour died, Seymour's wife and his mother had no contact with the family. I asked her for a picture of Seymour, and she said never to call again. It's not like I asked for property, money, jewelry. I just wanted to know, do I look like my dad? So some of the girls in the society told me, yeah, just keep calling her and trying to reach her. And I decided to abide by her wishes. So no such luck with information. I did try looking in the white pages on the internet to find my half brother. I found out he lived in Brooklyn. The phone numbers listed were not in service. So I have family in Brooklyn. I called them to see if maybe they can find more current information. So I did write him a letter. I checked on Facebook. I tried other avenues to find him, and no such luck. Later on at one of my high school reunions, I reunited with one of my classmates. He's retired FBI. He checked with some friends in New York. and they couldn't find him. So it was basically like he fell off the face of the earth. April of 2012, still no word from my half brother. So I contacted another cousin in Brooklyn. He's a retired New York City detective. He went over to the address. Obviously, he didn't live there anymore. He couldn't find out anything, even through the New York records. He couldn't find anything. So, like I said, this guy is just scarce somewhere else. On April 4th, Sharon's birthday, I talked to her that day. She told me that our sister Marcy passed away in February. She had problems with drug and alcohol, and I was very sorry that I was unable to meet her. This was the Weissman's 1940 census. Samuel Zwerin's 1940 census. This is my grandfather. This was a record that took me many years to find. It was the marriage record for my grandmother, Narciso Gavilo, and this is the blow up of it. They were married in Pennsylvania, which nobody can figure out who they knew there or why they got married there. Maybe the laws were different, but at least we do know that they were officially married. Oops. I don't know what happened, but let me go back to this.
Jean, I think you need to redo the screen share. It must have X'd out.
It's saying it's a PowerPoint problem. Let me bring it back up.
Good save. Thanks.
Hey, you know, just need to find out where I am. Okay, so this is, make this bigger. Eileen, I don't see this sharing.
So I can see your full screen, not just that one window.
Oh, okay.
So if you just, yeah, so if you just want to make that full screen and click the slide, show as slideshow, we should be able to see it.
No,
So next to that little zoom, yeah, click that.
I did, and it's not.
So on the left-hand side, next to the little 4 squares, there's like one next to it that looks like a little slide kind of projector screen to the left, next to the minus sign. 2 to the, yeah, right there. Try that.
Ah, thank you.
There we go. My
Okay,
pleasure.
so there's me, Deborah Gavilo, my half sisters, Sharon and Marcy, my mother, Jerry, my father, Seymour, my grandmother with still not sure about grandfathers, my grandfather on my father's side, my great-grandparents on my mother's side, and my great-grandparents on my father's side. So I did DNA when I was at the Jamboree Conference in 2013 at the Southern California Genealogical Society. DNA is all new to me. I still don't understand a lot about it. I did purchase kits for Aunt Lynn, Sharon, and myself. I figured since I paid for the kits, it wasn't a financial burden for them. So I sent the kits to Sharon. When I went back in September, my aunt said she sent hers in already, but my sister didn't do it yet. So the night before I left, Sharon finally spit in the tube. She said she would take it to work the next day. And then the match showed up as a niece. not as a half sister. And now my aunt shows up as a first cousin. But as I said, I'm still trying to understand DNA. This is my ethnicity, and it shows Ashkenazi 22.98, East Asian 19.51, and Eastern Mediterranean 17.63, and then a whole bunch of other little things in there. So the DNA matches up with what I knew from the family. And my aunt and my sister all are very similar. On June 12th and 14, because I listed information on one of the DNA websites, I was contacted from 23andMe, and it wound up being the great niece of Narciso Gavilo. We had many conversations and emails. She said my DNA doesn't match anybody in her family. And now that I do believe Aunt Lynn is correct, that Narciso is not my grandfather. So on January 4th, 2015, I finally found a phone number online in the white pages for Cayetano Lysing's son. I called him. I spoke to the housekeeper, and I still haven't been able to reach him. They were out of the country at the time. So I've had no luck. I've tried more recently and still no luck with reaching him. But Sharon did say she met Cayetano and Lillian Lysing when she was a lot younger. Doesn't remember a whole lot about them, but they were family friends. On the 31st of January in 2015, one of the gals in my society found out that my half-brother had written articles for Aquatica newsletter in Brooklyn. I spoke to the editor, and he remembered my half-brother. He did say he had medical problems. He had problems in his apartment. There was a fire. There was some other issues, but he really didn't know him well. He gave me another person to contact, and I did. He said, yeah, he does talk to my half-brother occasionally. He took all my information. He said it would give it to my half-brother. Never heard from him. So I'm keep trying. I was going down to Key West, Florida for a reunion. So I called Sharon. I said, hey, you want to meet somewhere? She says, well, why don't we go to Fort Lauderdale because we have an uncle there. I said, great. So I hopped on a plane from New York and from San Diego. She hopped on a plane from New Jersey, and I was connecting flight in Atlanta, wound up being the same flight with her. So we got to spend a little more time with each other. And then on May 26th, I got to meet Uncle Howard and Aunt Phyllis. I had such a warm welcoming to the family by them also. We spent hours talking. We had lunch. He brought photo albums when they were growing up. It was just so great to meet them. And now they've moved to Arizona. And at some point, I'm going to get there and visit with them more often. This is the headstones for my grandmother and her latest husband. And then on August 10th in Seattle, when I was doing my presentation, I met somebody in the audience and her maiden name was Zwerin. So obviously we had a lot of catching up to do. We did research and we decided it wasn't the right Zwerin family. I didn't realize, as I said, so many Zwerins, but we keep trying to figure it out, and maybe someday we'll find out the real connection. Also, while I was there in Seattle, I met a private detective. So we exchanged phone numbers. He said he would be willing to try to do some research for me to find my half-brother. He gave me some new information and some that I had. Still no luck in locating him. So now I've had an FBI agent, a city detective, and a PI, and nobody can find this guy. September 23rd, 2018, I'm back in Brooklyn. So I contacted my half-brother's friend again. He said, yeah, he gave my half-brother the info. I still hadn't heard from him, but I thought, Well, I'm in New York. Maybe it'll be easier. Still no luck. I'm still trying to verify information I've gathered. I want to find more information on the Gavilo, Weissman, Lysing, and Zwerin families. I always look forward to going back east to spend more time with my adopted and my birth family. But with COVID, I haven't been able to get back there. So I'll still keep trying. I still want to do research on my adopted family, and still hope to find more family members. This is the pedigree chart when I was adopted, and this is my original birth family. So it's really nice to be able to have all the information and all the names. On November 14th, 2019, New York passed a law that made it effective on January 15th, 2020. It allowed adoptees and relatives of adoptees to request the original pre-adoption birth certificate, which was finally a milestone. So on January 29th, I sent in my application and awaiting the information back. It said it would take 90 days. Heck, I'm 68 years old at the time. What's another few months at this point? So here's my tracking. It was received on February 3rd, and then COVID hit. So everything came to a stop. So now I figured, okay, it's going to be a heck of a lot longer than 90 days. And, but at least I know it's in New York. On October 14th, I was shocked when I received the return receipt from New York. So from February to October, it was sitting somewhere. On October 28th, I got an email from a gal at the New York Department of Mental Health and Hygiene. She said they could not process the application because there was some missing information. I immediately filled in what I needed. I sent it back. So now I'm playing the waiting game again, but it'll be well worth it to actually have my original birth certificate. And I'm also told that if they have any other paperwork or records, that will be included in what I receive. So I'm really anxious to see what I have. There is a handout. It lists the resources and agencies that were helpful in my research in New York, additional nationwide information, other websites. And there's a book I read by Richard Hill. I met him in Burbank a few years ago, and it's about finding family, my search and roots, and the secrets in his DNA. And it was a fascinating book. So I want to thank all of you for attending my story. I now have some parts of the puzzle and yet to discover how the pieces fit together, and hopefully some of the information will be helpful to either you or people that you know that are adopted. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I'll be happy to try to answer any questions that I can.
Thank you all so much. I'm going to allow people to unmute if they need. That way we can also get some Q&A going that way. And I did see some compliments come through. Aaron had shared with us the New York bill, which grants rights for adoptees to get their birth certificate. There's a link there. And I will be sending out the PDF with that information and those resources that Jean mentioned.
Great. Thank you. And there was Eileen, you sent me an email from a Jonathan Scheffler. Is he on? Did he join today?
Yes, I'm on.
Okay. Because your father, it was a private adoption, I really don't know anything about it. You can search maybe online to at least, I mean, obviously, you know your family. I don't know if you can find out anything about the adoption. Was it in New York?
Yeah, it was in Manhattan, New York, New York.
Okay, because the paperwork that I filled out, they asked, you know, for my adopted family's information, but they also asked for my birth family's information. So because it's private, I don't know where you would go. You may want to maybe contact some of the agencies there and ask. and see if they can give you any information at all. Do you know, was there a lawyer involved or anything else with the adoption?
Yeah, I have my biological grandmother's name, but unfortunately, I have reason to believe it's a married name and was not. I can't track down what her. So that's sort of a dead end. Yeah, it was arranged by my great uncle, who was an attorney.
Okay.
Private adoption.
And they have no information, no paperwork or anything?
We do have, I have to check what the level of the birth certificate is. We have something with his birth mother's name on it, and that's it.
Okay.
That's the information we have.
Because as I said, I went to the public library, and with a coordinating of the number on my birth certificate, I was able to find my actual name, and that may be somewhere that, you can look there and find out.
Okay, yeah, that's actually very helpful. I'm going to check the number on the birth certificate, and I will go down to the library, or next time I'm in New York, I'll go to the library and check it. That's very
And when it's
helpful.
opened again too.
Yeah. But thank you.
Yeah. On the handouts, my email. So if you ever want to contact me directly, I'll be more than happy to try to help you out with anything I can.
Thank you so much.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
Eileen, any other questions or?
Well, yeah, I'm seeing some stuff. I see. So Aaron Scheinbein and his family, I see a few of them are on the call. They actually founded a website, findmyfamily.org. So Aaron is dropping some terrific information in there for people to check out.
Oh, good.
And Ronnie Udoff has a question. She says, "Why do you know why you were adopted at 4.5 months after your birth, and was that typical?"
I think what happens is it's the process probably that they have to vet the families to make sure that they're qualified adoptee, to be adopted parents, because the social workers are going to have to go to the home to see, is there a place for the baby? Are they working family? Can they afford it? Where do they live? Just different things that happen. In talking with my other cousins, they didn't really tell me how long before they were actually adopted. And I'm sure there's a process of, how many applicants are applying, and then they have to decide which is the best fit.